Hi, everybody. Welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you for joining us. Let's get a quick take on the Colorado Independent Ethics Commission voting 4-1 to dismiss a complaint against Governor John Hickenlooper this week. Patty, the complaint was dismissed. It seems like a clean slate, but has the damage been done because he already had a complaint filed against him?
No, I don't think Hickenlooper comes out damaged on this. We have to remember many other people have had complaints filed against them, and in Gessler's case, he was found in violation. It was smart of Gessler. You know, he asked that his that verdict be what's the term here? Lawyers adjudicated, overturned, and it was smart. He did that day. And really, when you look at it, the two arguments were. The situations were a little different, but it was interesting that the best witness for Hickenlooper was Suthers, who said, you know, this is stuff you do. You do these. And in fact, the lawyer who brought the complaint up had also been a staffer for Suthers who had been paid for. So Amendment 41 really needs people to look at it right now.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School, welcome back. We haven't seen you for a few weeks. What did you make of the ethics complaint being dismissed?
Amendment 41 is a travesty and was put on the ballot for micro-political purposes in that year, and continues to do a lot of damage to the actual operation of Colorado state government. The Colorado Statesman, weekly political newspaper, in its convention eve issue, had a Republican section and a Democratic section. And Miller Hudson, a former state legislator, who's a columnist for both, wrote very good columns saying the ethics complaint against Hickenlooper is bogus and that the ethics complaint against Scott Gessler is bogus. These are all stupid things, and there's just malicious people whose job is to file lame ethics complaints against people of the other political party, and I wish that would all go away.
Penfield Tate, attorney at the Greenberg-Traurig, also a longtime state lawmaker. Do you think the complaint, now that it's dismissed, is clean off of Hickenlooper's slate, or did negative ads still get produced?
Yes and yes. It's clean off of his slate. Negative ads are still going to get produced, but I think the more important point is what everybody else has alluded to. Amendment 41 doesn't make sense because it really doesn't get to the essence of what people want to see, and that is, you know, clean up politics, clean up. Well, I don't think we have graft and corruption in Colorado. We don't have a history of it. And so what happens is the practice of filing these complaints are themselves almost unethical because you question the motivation of every complaint that's filed, whether there's really some sort of legitimate violation of law or rule or policy, or whether someone's just trying to leverage for political advantage. So, you know, yeah, the negative ad's going to get produced. They're going to get produced about Scott Gessler, too. But at the end of the day, you know, I think I agree with the Attorney General. I don't think Gessler did anything wrong. I don't think Hickenlooper did anything wrong. Folks are barking up the wrong tree.
Mike Litwin from ColoradoIndependent.com. Wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I mean, Hickenlooper is the guy in the shower, right? I mean, he's the clean guy already. He's a known quantity. Nobody's going to pin anything like this on Hickenlooper. But the idea of Amendment 41 is the problem here. It was sloppily written. We are a relatively clean state. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have laws that make sure people follow the rules. But this one was vague, and the rules they're asking to file just aren't followable, if that's a word.
It is now. Former State Senator Mike Kopp won the top line of the Republican Gubernatorial Primary Ballot at the State Assembly last weekend, narrowly edging out Scott Gessler. With Bob Beaupre's signatures certified this week, the primary ballot is official, with Kopp, Gessler, Beaupre, and Tom Tancredo. Patty, were you surprised at Kopp getting top line?
Well, not as surprised as I was 4 years ago with Dan Mays getting top line. You know, Kopp is a really good candidate, and I think probably what I heard is that he impressed people who hadn't seen him before. He also had some of his ground game pick up. I was surprised actually that Brophy didn't do better, but you kind of wonder where Tom Tancredo's votes in that hall went, and maybe some of them went to Kopp. You know, Kopp is a former hotshot firefighter, former rodeo guy, former Army Ranger. He will be an interesting backstory. Interesting enough to overcome, say, Beaupre, Tancredo, and Gessler. I don't know, but boy, I hope they all participate in debates because these will be very, very fun.
I would echo that sentiment. I hope they all debate as well. David, what do you think of Kopp's landing in the race? I mean, you have three pretty well-known heavy hitters, Beaupre, Tancredo, and Gessler. They've been able to create that ground game that Patty alluded to, raise some more money. Kopp seems to be the underdog, but would you still consider him the underdog?
Not anymore, not after that performance that I think shocked everyone. It's a sign of the Republican, at least the convention delegates, I think being pragmatic and saying, realistically, of these candidates we've got, they're all pretty much mainstream Republicans. The decisions they'd make as governor, a few might be different here or there, but they're basically going to be pretty similar. So we ought to choose the guy who's got the best chance of beating Hickenlooper, and I think that's clearly Mike Kopp. Now, Kopp had a slow start to his campaign at the beginning of this year, but he apparently is picking up some momentum and getting his game together. So he deserves the opportunity to go through the primary process and demonstrate to the Republican primary voters why he might be the strongest candidate against Hickenlooper.
Penn, how powerful is that momentum? I mean, I know in Colorado we like the underdog story, we like the momentum story, but when it comes down to it, momentum doesn't pay the bills. What do you think of Kopp's emergence?
Momentum is not as important as your ability to capitalize on the appearance of momentum and turn it into something that really lasts in the campaign. There's something you said earlier that I think sticks with me and sort of tells the story. You talked about Kopp now being among the heavy hitters in this race, and I think Kopp's presence really tells you in many respects there are no heavy hitters in this race. There is no one overwhelming candidate on the Republican side of the aisle that's going to be able to clear the decks and say, let me take Hickenlooper on head on. I hope they all debate. They're going to be fascinating debates where you get to see the differences between these four candidates. And they're all men who are going to be comfortable bloodying each other's noses a little bit, trying to make that point and to leverage into the general election. So I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it's important for the Republican Party, too, because I think there are a couple of choices they could make that would continue to doom their efforts into the future. So I think this is going to be a telling race for sort of the soul and future of the Colorado Republican Party.
Mike, you had a great piece on all the governor candidates at coloradoindependent.com. What did you make of Kopp making the Final Four?
It's fascinating. I mean, it's funny because the Democrats think Kopp is the best candidate to run against Hickenlooper. He's the guy that they're most worried about. The question is, he has no money. He also has a charisma problem. He's a great guy. He has a great backstory. He has a great personal story. He's got a great resume, and what he has that really works for a Republican in Colorado, he's a hardline conservative, but he's very moderate in demeanor. And his politics doesn't get in the way of his personality, which you can't say for all Republican candidates. So the Democrats are afraid that he'd be their best choice, but the question is, can he take the momentum from this assembly and raise any money with it? Do the money people in Colorado, who are going to give in Colorado, are they thinking that the governor's race is worth putting money into, particularly in the primary season, particularly when Cory Gardner is going to require so much money in his race against Udall? I think not much money is going to be put into the primary race. And if there isn't that much money there, then I think Kopp is going to have a hard time winning.
It'll be fun to watch over the next 10 weeks. State Senate Democrats spiked a bill that triggered significant protests at the Capitol this week. Senate Bill 175, dubbed the Reproductive Health Freedom Act, addressed abortion rights. Critics claim that the bill would have turned back previous laws, including parental notification. David, even though the bill was spiked, was it out there enough where either Republican candidates can make some hay with it, or that Democrat candidates might actually find some damage when it comes to about 8 months from now?
I think the abortion of this bill prevented what would have been catastrophic damage to some Democratic candidates. Remember that the Colorado is always changing, and one of the new conditions in Colorado is the Colorado Democratic Party is much more immigrant Catholic than it used to be. And that would have been, for them to vote for this very, very, very strong pro-abortion rights bill would have really caused a lot of trouble within the party for some of those Democrats. And some of them are like, well, I'm in a safe seat in Northwest Denver, who cares? But others are in swing districts in Adams County, for example. One of the concepts I liked and also it went very, very far. It was an implicit repeal on the requirement for parental notification, for a 12-year-old girl to get an abortion, which had a safety valve in case the girl was being abused or something. The one thing I liked about the bill is it said you can't have any restrictions on abortion or birth control or whatever, unless there's good medical scientific evidence for that. If only the legislature would apply that principle to restrictions on guns and everything else, that would be a good start. I'd take that sentence and put it in the Constitution and say this applies to everything. Don't limit people's freedom unless you've actually got good evidence in favor of it.
Common sense is never going to be actually put into the Constitution. I know that far. Ben, what interested me is, and I don't know the story, and maybe it's just not there, but who do you think raised the flag to say we have to spike this? Was it after the protests in the state capitol? Was it someone maybe like a John Hickenlooper saying, I do not want this on my desk? Where do you think the trigger came from, like we have to spike this?
My guess is that the protest on the steps of the Capitol had some impact. But I would think that for many Democrats, they're probably having this sense of deja vu about gun legislation of a couple sessions ago, thinking, do we really need to have this conversation right now in an election year? Do we really need to have this debate? I mean, there's not any anti-choice legislation really that's got a chance of succeeding, so we don't have to fend that off and get on record there. We're not really expanding choice in Colorado, a woman's right to choose in Colorado, which I still think is a predominantly pro-choice state. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the intent and message of this bill? Is it a message we need to send right now? And I think what probably happened is you probably got a couple of members who are from swing districts who probably went to leadership and said, seriously, you really want to put this on the agenda and have a recorded vote on this now when we're not accomplishing anything but making, a rah-rah statement. And it's an important issue, but I think the timing was poor. And I think what happened is that everybody sat down and said, you're right. This is not the time. This is not the bill. This is not the issue. And most of us are on record supporting a woman's right to choose. We don't need to push this legislation because it doesn't substantively advance the cause. Let's just, put it away and move on to some other issues.
Mike, the timing seemed odd to me, too, that there's only 3.5 or so weeks left in the session. I mean, this is supposed to be crunch time, really get the important stuff out, and this seemed like something that, like Penn alluded to, that there wasn't this significant problem it was solving. What did you make of how everything went down?
I have two questions. One, let's wind back the tape. Did David really get to guns on the abortion question? I just want to be sure.
He's made longer stretches.
I wasn't sure. Two, I'm wondering, didn't everyone get the memo? The memo for this session of the legislature was, for Democrats, we don't want to do anything. Do nothing to get us in trouble. That was last year. Last year we did all the stuff that was controversial. This year we will do nothing controversial. I'm sure Hickenlooper probably fell back and slammed his head on the floor. What in the world are these people doing? I thought I had some control. This was a huge mistake, terrible timing, nothing bubbling up to bring for a cause, nothing to say we're trying to remedy this situation. I mean, wrong timing, wrong year, wrong bill. Didn't get the memo.
Patty, was it spiked soon enough? With what seemingly looks like the success of the protest from Archbishop Aquila here in Denver, did that give a little bit of energy, some juice to Republicans, at least social conservatives within the party, or does that go away because, it's April?
I think it'll go away because there'll be plenty of other fights. If this had gone all the way through and been passed and then whatever, who knows what Hickenlooper would have done with it, then we would have had juice either way for the election. But Mike's right, there was no clear and present danger to Colorado's passage of women's right to choose. You know, we were the first state to legalize abortion back in '68, I think. You know, and there have been incursions on that, but not lately. We have not had that concern. Where we really have the issue being fought out now is in the federal courts, both abortion and some of the birth control issues with Hobby Lobby and now James Dobson, you know, not wanting to provide that in their health care. The issue is being fought on the federal front, and Colorado just didn't need to get into this now.
A second episode of violence happened this week that was blamed on pot edibles. Richard Kirk, who was allegedly hallucinating due to consuming marijuana candy, shot his wife while she was on the phone with a 911 dispatcher. Meanwhile, a State House committee unanimously approved a bill yesterday that would require pot edibles to be clearly labeled. Penn, when we have tragic events like this, there's always a rush to judgment. Oh, it was pot. There's investigations going on, a lot of different elements of it. What else was there? Are there other problems with Richard Kirk? But it's a significant, at least initial public opinion black eye for pot and pot edibles. What have you made from the different events that came out this week?
You know, what I think it leads to is lawmakers have to really take a hard look. You know, we're a state that has legalized medicinal marijuana. We're a state that's legalized marijuana for personal use. With that comes edibles. And we're on the front edge of this, and so we have to have the right regulatory environment. Everybody's skipping in the aisles about tax revenues. That's great. Spend some of that money and protect consumers and protect the general public with this lawful enterprise. Come up with laboratories that can test products and can tell you what the content is. Make sure that the people who are marketing and selling this stuff label it correctly, you know, because people are going to use these products, and that's fine. It's legal to do so. But if you know that we now have enough anecdotal evidence to tell us there's a danger out here. We got people making stuff, selling stuff. They don't know what's in it. We don't know what's in it, and people are consuming it. And, you know, you've got the whole science piece in terms of the delayed impact. So, yeah, we're going to have to be much more aggressive in terms of putting together a statewide regulatory environment and the apparatus to test and protect not just consumers, but also the people who sell these products. I think some of the merchants may not know what's the contents of some of the stuff they're selling, and they have a right to be protected, too. So we've got some work to do.
Mike, some of the merchants have talked about that some of the labeling laws already are pretty expensive. It makes it cost prohibitive, but obviously there's still questions. What do you think?
Well, you know, obviously there's going to be headlines when you have pot and crime. It's been amazing to me that so far how little crime there has actually been that's been related to legalization of marijuana. I've had some friends who've come into town since it's been legalized and saying, "Where's the pot? I don't see any more pot on this street than I do in the town I come from." And so it's like, you know, Colorado isn't somehow a very new place, but you know, we're in the forefront of this thing. We've taken that responsibility. If it's going to work, it needs to work in Colorado. And I read an interesting thing from a UCLA professor who's supposedly a pot expert, and he said that prohibition is the worst thing, but the second worst thing is to have the way states regulate alcohol, and that there needs to be a federal law that passes this, that we can have some real scientific looks at what we're dealing with. You know, doing it in Colorado isn't going to get an answer.
Patty, what do you think? I mean, the edibles, you know, from every step of the chain, it seems that it's still kind of an unknown. It's kind of like if alcohol's legal, suddenly you just have every different batch of moonshine. We don't know how powerful or deadly it might be. Does this besmirch the entire marijuana industry? Do they need to take a lead in this regulation?
Well, some of them already have talked about it. They don't have problems with labeling as long, you know, clear labeling. I don't know if they're going to make everything in the shape of like a skull and crossbones. I don't think they're going to go that far. But when you look at look at what food products have. You know every single thing that's in a food product. So it's not unreasonable that you are going to ask for more in edibles. You should know more, have more information, and you certainly should know how much THC is in them. The Denver posted that story that proved they really are nowhere near often what they are billed as. So we will see that kind of labeling. What we also have now is, it's just like that media hysteria. How many deaths have there been because of alcohol? Right. Alcohol involved in shooting, kids falling off balconies because of alcohol every spring break. It's just, it's now the fun story for everyone to write. But we don't hear people talking about let's ban balconies or let's ban guns, both of which seemed just as culpable in the most recent crimes we've heard about.
David, what did you make of the developments, especially with the Kirk case?
Well, to follow up on Patty's point, if you're a reporter for Westward or the Denver Post or the Colorado Independent, and you run into your editors, like, oh, I've got this story. This guy got like really stupidly drunk and then killed somebody in his family. Your editor will say, son, that's not news. That goes on all the time. But if you come in with a story, he got high, and he was also on prescription painkillers at the time, and maybe there was some kind of synergistic destructive effect, that's news. That has a novelty value, and that'll get you on the front page of the newspaper. We know from everyone with experience in the criminal justice system can tell you that if of all the drugs and substances that are involved in crime, alcohol is run away by far the main one. It is a proven disinhibitor for violence, and so much violent crime is perpetrated under, and not to mention drunk driving and killing people, things like that, perpetrated under the influence of alcohol. But I think as a society, we've made the correct decision that prohibition was even worse and caused far more problems. With marijuana, it's actually a much easier case, because does marijuana ever have bad effects on people? Yes, but the gain of prohibition was much smaller than with alcohol.
Let's get a quick take on this one. Denver police answered questions this week about how it responded to the murder of Christine Kirk in Observatory Park. Questions have been raised about why it took over 16 minutes to respond to the call. Mike, is this going to be time for some uncomfortable conversations at City Hall?
Well, it should be time for some uncomfortable conversations, and when you throw when you throw edibles into the mix, it's going to remain a story. So I think because it will remain a story, that means that the cops will have to actually do something about it.
Patty, what do you think?
Well, Denver used to also have a reputation at being at the forefront of fighting domestic violence. 16 minutes on a domestic violence call. They're like 2 minutes from the police station in University Park. It's outrageous, and that is the story that is going to really be the one talked about after we're done talking about edibles on this.
David, who's the heat on most? Is it Chief White and the changes he's tried to make? Is it Mayor Hancock? Is it everybody? What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, the people of Denver, unlike people who can vote for their county sheriff, don't have the ability to elect their chief law enforcement officer. So yes, it's ultimately Mayor Hancock's responsibility, because he appoints the manager of public safety and the chief of police. 16 minutes reinforces that old saying, which is accurate, that when seconds count, the police are minutes away. But even if let's improve that by 50%, so it's 8 minutes. That's still a long time. And if you look at the data from around the country about police response time to 911 level 1 calls, highest level life-threatening emergency, you see the good jurisdictions are maybe 6 minutes, and the bad ones are 11 or 12 or 14. Whatever it is, there's a significant window between the time you call for 911 and when somebody shows up to help.
Penn, finish it up for us.
Now, the heat's going to be on everyone, particularly since Denver, with additional revenue last year, brought an incoming class in cadets, and so they'll be expanding the size of the police force. There's no excuse for this, but there better be some explanations so that the public understands why it took 16 minutes to respond to this call. The other thing I'd offer, just as we talk about this topic, I don't think any of us are saying that somehow alcohol is getting a free ride on this because of what's going on with marijuana. I think part of what we're saying now is there at least is a regulatory environment for alcohol. When people consume it, they know what's in it. If they overconsume and behave badly, that's their fault. But there's this unknown with these edibles where we got to figure out and let people give them fair notice so they know what they're taking.
Our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. Patty, start us off.
Before 420 became known for pot, or the 15th anniversary of the Columbine shootings, there was the Ludlow Massacre, which is an incredible episode in Colorado history, 100-year anniversary on 420 of the worst labor incident in U.S. history.
David.
And let's remember about Ludlow that it led to an emergency session of the legislature where Governor Ammons got a gun control bill enacted, and in fact the foundation of statutory gun control in Colorado, some of which we still have on the books, was the whole anti-union legislative acts in that period.
Penn.
Yeah, I think Patty's right leading with Ludlow. It is a difficult time in Colorado history, but you can't ignore it. Hopefully we learn from it and do better.
Mike.
I want to get back to gun nuts. Guns. That crazy guy, Clive Bundy, who is out and protecting his cows by bringing in the militiaites from all over the West. Rand Paul, giving a bad name to libertarians, rushed to his defense and for a guy who said he didn't believe in the United States legitimacy of the United States government.
Say something nice rather quickly. Patty.
Although we have given alcohol a bad rap here, I do not think 3-2 beer in Washington Park is the scourge causing all the trouble, and good for Charlie Brown for sending a letter to Parks and Rec with other suggestions that really might help the problems more.
David.
The Guardian newspaper and the Washington Post, which I'm a columnist for these days, winning the Pulitzer Prize jointly for well-deserved effort to expose illegal spying on the American people.
Penn.
Just shout out to the Avs, being one of the few teams that made the playoffs this year.
They had a great game last night.
Yeah.
Mike.
Dave Phillips, who won a Pulitzer for the Colorado Springs Gazette for a great series on how veterans come home and are kicked out of the service for minor things after they've suffered terrible injury in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Great to get a local winner. That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Do they actually have any?